What happens when a legendary martial artist walks onto a morning show expecting a light-hearted chat, and instead walks straight into an ambush? This is the confrontation that had producers screaming in their earpieces, camera rigs rattling, and the control room demanding a commercial break that never came. What you're about to hear isn't just an interview. It's a clash of egos, philosophies, and pride that ended with one of America's most respected action icons being escorted off set by security. Before we roll the tape, smash that subscribe button and tell us in the comments, was this a setup or did Chuck finally lose his cool? You be the judge. It all started on a Tuesday morning. Chuck Norris arrived at the Good Morning America studio wearing his usual calm black shirt, firm handshake, easy smile. He thought he was there to talk about his new charity initiative. Maybe share a few laughs about the internet memes that made him immortal to an entire generation. Behind the desk sat George Stephanopoulos, serious, stone-faced, flipping through his cue cards with the kind of intensity normally reserved for presidential debates. It should have been the first red flag. But Chuck, ever composed, took his seat, nodded to the crew, and waited for the light to go red. And then it began. "I'm here with Chuck Norris," George said, his tone clipped and icy. Martial artist, actor, and according to the internet, a man who can count to infinity twice. "Chuck, do you actually believe the absurd things people say about you online?" There was a flicker in Chuck's eyes. Surprise, maybe, but not fear. "No, George," he said calmly. "I think people enjoy those jokes because they stand for something. Resilience, strength, perseverance. And if that gives people a bit of hope, I'm honored to be part of it." George wasn't buying it. He leaned forward, voice sharpening like a blade. "But don't you find it embarrassing? Grown adults worshipping a caricature. You've built a brand on fantasy, on delusions. Do you really think that's something to be proud of?" The studio fell still. Even the interns stopped moving. Chuck's jaw tightened. "I think you're missing the point. It's not about me. It's about the idea that you can push past what people think is possible." George cut in, voice now dripping with condescension. "Or maybe you're just cashing in. Let's face it, Chuck. You're not a myth. You're an actor who knows a few moves. You're not a warrior. You're a brand with a beard." Chuck's hands slowly gripped the armrests of his chair. His voice dropped an octave. "I've spent my life training, competing, teaching. I've earned my black belts through decades of sweat, discipline, and failure. I've never claimed to be superhuman, but I have claimed the right to be respected, for the same reason every martial artist deserves it." George smiled, a tight, knowing grin. He had him now, respected. "For what? Walker, Texas Ranger, your film?" "Be honest, Chuck. Do you think you've ever contributed anything real to cinema? Or are you content being a punchline in a headband?" That did it. Chuck's eyes flashed. The calm exterior cracked. "I've entertained millions. I've created jobs. I've inspired kids to stand up for themselves when no one else would. I've taught values, real ones. What have you done, George, besides hiding behind a desk and tearing down other people's work?" The smile on George's face twisted into something colder. "I've informed the public. I've questioned power. I don't need fake muscles and choreographed fights to do my job." "Pretend," Chuck's voice thundered. The word hit the room like a gut punch. Cameramen stepped back. One producer waved frantically for a commercial cut that wasn't coming. "You think I pretend to be tough?" George leaned back in his chair, smug, unshaken. "You're an actor, Chuck. It's all theater. You don't live in the real world. You live on sets. You play a fighter. Some of us fight real battles, without stunt doubles." And that was the moment it snapped. Chuck leaned in, voice now deadly quiet. "You think sitting in an air-conditioned studio grilling people on camera is a real fight? I've been in tournaments where losing meant waking up on the floor with a busted rib. I've trained with warriors. I've been hit, cut, bruised, and broken. I earned everything I have, George. Not through lighting and camera tricks, but through pain, through discipline, through truth. But George couldn't stop. Maybe he thought he was winning. Maybe he just didn't see the storm brewing. And yet, here you are, he said smugly, reduced to a meme, a joke. Chuck Norris, the man who fought the internet and lost. That's when Chuck stood up, not fast, not loud, but with the quiet menace of a man who's won real fights and knows he could win another right now if he had to. Security rushed the set. Cameras stopped rolling, and George, suddenly very pale, realized he had gone way too far. George's cold lie, tell me, Chuck, how does it feel watching your legacy become a punchline for teenagers online? The question hit like a gut punch. The air in the studio thickened. Chuck Norris didn't flinch. He sat still, eerily still. His breathing slowed, measured like a warrior centering before a strike. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, steady, carrying the weight of decades barely holding back fury. See you case evenly, my legacy. My legacy isn't memes or internet jokes. It's the thousands of students I trained to respect themselves and others. It's the charities I've supported, the veterans I've stood by, the values I've tried to instill. But you wouldn't know about any of that, would you, George? Too busy chasing cheap clicks to recognize substance. George smelled blood. He leaned in like a predator sensing the kill. George's mocking positive messages. Is that what you call endorsing conspiracy theories and fringe political figures? Spreading misinformation to people who trust you. Some legacy. That hit harder. Chuck's hands gripped the arms of his chair. His knuckles turned white. The cameras picked up a subtle shift. His jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed. His voice dropped to a growl. Siuske low dangerous. Now you're calling me a conspiracy theorist. You're questioning my character. On national television. Without a shred of evidence. What kind of journalist ambushes his guests with accusations instead of asking real questions? George leaned in further smug. GRG. I'm the kind of journalist who asks the questions that make people uncomfortable. That's real journalism, Chuck. Maybe you're just not used to someone who isn't impressed by the tough guy routine. CK. It's a voice rising tough guy routine. You think this is an act. The tournaments I won, the students I mentored, the discipline I've lived by for 50 years. You think that's a brand. Silence. You could hear the whir of the cameras, the distant shuffle of stunned crew. No one moved. George, oblivious or reckless, doubled down. GORGE. What I think is you've been playing Chuck Norris for so long, you forgot who you really are. You bought into your own myth. The Emperor has no clothes. Chuck stood. Fast, his chair shot back, crashing into the backdrop. 2 camera operators jumped. Now he towered over George. All 6 feet of him radiated heat like a furnace barely contained. When he spoke, it was a whisper. But it could have split concrete. CK stand up, George. A chill swept the studio. George blinked. His smirk cracked. He stayed seated. CK sharpered, I said. Stand up. You want to question my life's work? Call me a fraud. Then do it like a man. Don't sit behind that desk like a coward lobbing cheap shots. All eyes turned to George. His confidence wavered. He looked around cornered, exposed. For a split second he considered backing down. But he chose arrogance. GORG snapping, I don't need to stand to expose you. Chuck, everyone can see what you are. A man who resorts to threats the moment someone challenges him. You built your career on violence, and now you're proving it. That flipped a switch in Chuck's brain. His eyes narrowed. His posture shifted, not to strike, but to restrain. His training surged to the surface. The warrior within remembered his code, never strike first. Never strike in anger, always control. But the storm inside him raged. Being accused of intimidation, when all he'd done was defend himself, was a line even Chuck's legendary patience couldn't let slide. Threats, Chuck said, his voice low but sharp. You think that was a threat, George? Trust me, if I were threatening you, there wouldn't be any confusion. What I gave you was a chance. A chance to show the same spine you demand from the people you interrogate for a living. But it seems the only time you're brave is when you're sitting behind a desk, flanked by security. George's eyes flicked toward the studio's perimeter. He knew exactly where the guards were stationed. But pride anchored him. He wouldn't call for help. Not yet. Not on live television. Instead, he doubled down. Security, George scoffed. Is that supposed to scare me? He leaned forward, voice sharpening. I've interviewed warlords, despots, real monsters. I'm not afraid of some washed-up action hero throwing a fit because someone finally told him the truth. The word washed up hit the air like a slap. Chuck's breathing slowed, deepened, controlled, focused. A familiar rhythm. The same rhythm that had steadied him before every fight of his career. When he spoke, the tone shifted completely. Washed up, he repeated softly. George, I'm 70 years old, and I could still put you on that floor before you knew what hit you. But I don't have to. Because I'm walking out of here with my dignity. Something you clearly lost the second you turned this into a stunt. George's composure began to slip, sensing he was losing control of the moment. And the narrative. He lashed out again. Walking out. That's it. When it gets tough, you run. That's who you really are, Chuck Norris. All talk. No substance. The words hung in the air like the calm before a lightning strike. Chuck stopped mid-step and turned back slowly. His stare, dead calm, ice cold, cut deeper than anything he'd said. Even the camera operators took a step back. His voice came so quiet it felt like the studio itself leaned in to hear it. What did you just say to me? George had faced presidents, prime ministers, tyrants, but nothing prepared him for this. Not the silence that followed. Not the weight in Chuck's eyes. Not the sudden realization that he might have just pushed the wrong man too far. But he didn't stop. I said you're all talk, George fired back. When someone finally puts real pressure on you, you crumble. You intimidate, then threaten to walk away. That's not legendary. That's cowardice. That's fraud. Chuck stepped forward. George instinctively rolled his chair back. A small movement, but everyone saw it. So did Chuck. He paused. His eyes narrowed. And in a voice that sliced through the air, he said, There it is. A pause. The real George Stephanopoulos. Tough behind the desk. But the second someone gets close, you retreat. Just like always. He stepped in closer. You want to talk fraud?
Look in a mirror.
George's face flushed red. The studio lights didn't help. His retreat had been caught by every camera in the room, and by every pair of eyes watching. In a last-ditch effort to reclaim authority, George made a critical mistake. I'm not the one making threats, Chuck. I'm not the one using physical presence to intimidate a journalist. If you can't handle tough questions without acting like a schoolyard bully, maybe you shouldn't do interviews at all. Chuck froze. The word bully hit harder than anything else that day. It wasn't anger on his face now. It was betrayal. He spoke again, voice barely above a whisper, but somehow heard in every corner of the studio. Bully, a pause. George, I've spent my life standing up to bullies. I've trained thousands to do the same. And right now, I'm staring at the biggest one I've ever met. George tried to interject, but Chuck wasn't finished. You invited me here under false pretenses. Promised a respectful conversation. Instead, you launched a one-man smear campaign, attacking my character. My integrity, my entire life's work. Then when I respond, you call me the bully. Chuck stepped back, shaking his head. His voice trembled with restrained fury. You are everything wrong with journalism today. A disgrace to the craft. That broke something in George. How dare you? He snapped, finally losing control. You think you can question my credibility. I've won awards. I've broken national stories. I've held real power accountable. You're just an actor who learned a few kicks. Don't you dare lecture me about journalism. Chuck's face hardened, his eyes going cold. Veteran martial artists watching the broadcast would recognize the moment. A man hitting his emotional threshold. Just an actor, he repeated. George, I was a world champion fighter before you ever held a microphone. I earned my place the hard way. Blood, sweat, dedication. You read lines written by someone else. We're not the same." And just as the silence returned, charged and thick, George stood up abruptly, jabbing a finger toward Chuck. That's when the real reckoning began. George sneered. "At least I don't need internet memes to stay relevant. People remember me for real journalism, not for fake superpowers and punchlines." The studio fell into stunned silence. A sharp murmur cut through the air as George's final jab echoed with a smug finality. Chuck didn't flinch. He stood there, calm, still, unmoved. His breathing was slow, deliberate. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the quiet finality of a man passing judgment. "George, I came here in good faith. I answered your questions with respect. I gave you dignity, even when you didn't earn it. But this wasn't an interview. This was an ambush, a performance. You didn't bring me here to talk. You brought me here to tear me down, for ratings." He turned toward the camera, his tone steady, unshaken. "This is what passes for journalism today. Cheap shots, character assassination, manufactured outrage. There was a time when tough questions came from a place of integrity. This is just ego dressed up as ethics." A George, flustered and reddening, tried to claw back control. "You don't get to turn this around on me, Chuck. I asked fair questions about your career, your public statements. If you can't handle scrutiny, maybe you shouldn't be a public figure." Chuck turned back to him, but now his gaze carried something worse than anger, disappointment, scrutiny. "No, George, you didn't ask questions. You made accusations. You weren't looking for answers. You were hoping for a spectacle. A journalist seeks truth. You sought to humiliate. And you failed." George's face was crimson. He glanced desperately at the crew, then tried to assert his authority with one final command. "This interview is over. Security, escort Mr. Norris from the building. I won't tolerate this kind of behavior on my show." Chuck didn't react with outrage. He didn't even raise his voice. Instead, what emerged was something far more dangerous: total moral clarity. "Security. For what, George? I haven't shouted. I haven't threatened anyone. I haven't moved from this spot. I've simply defended myself. And your response is to throw me out like a criminal." He raised a hand to the security guards who began approaching. Calm, commanding. "Stand down, gentlemen. I'm leaving. But not because he told me to. I'm leaving because I will not participate in this circus for one more second." He turned to the camera one last time, eyes locked with the audience. "To everyone watching, remember this moment. Remember what real character looks like when it's tested. And remember what happens when a journalist forgets his purpose. It's not to destroy. It's to inform." Chuck walked off set, head held high. George called after him, one last petty swipe. "That's right, Chuck. Walk away. Show everyone what you really are." Chuck paused at the edge of the stage. He turned back. Just once. "George, I'm not walking away because I'm afraid. I'm walking away from you. There's a difference. And deep down, you know it." The legend vanished through the exit. Behind him, a flustered host, a stunned studio, and cameras that had captured a moment that would soon explode across every platform on the internet. George sat frozen, producers scrambling around him. Whatever control he thought he had, it was gone. Chuck Norris had just done what no guest in live television history had dared. He walked into a trap and left the hunter looking like the prey. What do you think happened here? Was this a setup from the start? Or did George lose control, live on air? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more explosive showdowns and behind the scenes media drama. This wasn't just an interview. It was a reckoning.